Why do we have to just, not to cut anyone off, but why do we have to assume you're, just because you're a wife, you have to have kids?
Well, I said
I
most.
don't.
So I know I used to watch Kevin Samuels, so I know most of the stuff he was talking about was family. So, that's why I brought that up. But if we want to talk about non-family, then women that are not wives, you're out there still by yourself. Women, need men. They're protectors and all these other aspects that men bring to our lives, right? So if you walk around not being a wife, you're just out there by yourself. It's the same thing without a child. You got to do
I don't.
everything by yourself, and still you can still struggle the same way without children.
Personally, I don't think it has anything to do with family. I think the reason why he makes the differentiation between wives and the rest, is I think it's one specific thing, and that's intention. So to be a wife, based off of everything Kevin Samuels just said, is that requires intention. That requires full discretion over your behavior. That requires full self control. But every other category besides the wife doesn't require that same level of attention. You could be a baby mama that doesn't require attention. You could be a hoe that doesn't require attention. You could be a thought that doesn't require attention. All those things are just positions that you can fall into, but the wife position is one in specific that you don't really just fall into. It's like, unless you're preparing from day one to be a wife, you're gonna have difficulty stepping into that role. So definitely, I think that's really why he's saying either your wives or your everything else, because being a wife is the only one that requires intention from day one.
I completely agree with Clout Jones. Everyone is not meant to get married. If you can marry, marry. If you can't, don't do it. But I completely agree with Clout Jones. You have to be, I don't know why I'm saying your whole name, but you have to completely be dedicated to the process. You have to be, intentional about it. And it's in your mindset, it's in, your intention and how you approach yourself and approach that man. So I definitely agree with that. It's an intentional thing. So to comment to the was scrolling across the bottom here, there are two groups of women, wives, and everything else. Um, if you're not a wife, you're like Lady Di said, you're uncovered, and that's just that. If you're not a wife, you're uncovered. You're out here uncovered. So only wives get covered, or only wives are covered. So you know, I believe that if you're not intentional about wanting to be a wife or being a wife, then you're everything else.
All right.
Um, I think so. I get the question that Layla is asking, right? She's saying, why is it wife or everything else? And I think the way Kevin Samuels was speaking about that, he was speaking from a man's perspective, how men categorize women. He said, either you're a woman we want to, he's basically saying either you're the woman we want to marry or you're all the other things, whether that's the jump off or the girlfriend or the baby mama or the, you know what I mean, the night fighter, the sneaky link. So it's not, that's basically what he's alluding to, is that either you're the woman he wants to put a ring on it for, or you all other chicks. And that's how, you know what I mean, men pretty much categorize. That's how he was categorizing it. Now, of course, men got our different lots where we lot women at. If you want to break it down even further, that we slot y'all. Yeah, but essentially that's basically what he was saying, is that when you look at it on the grand scale of things, and he had a lot of women coming on his show wanting to get married, and he would talk to these women and they would say all these things. He'd tell them straight up, like, okay, you want to get married. Well, in a man's eyes, either you're a wife or you're all the other things. And oftentimes these women describe behavior that puts them in a category of everything else and not a wife.
I feel that was more clear.
Okay. Hey, Paradise, did you want to add to it?
I agree with Sweeney and Cloud. I think being a wife is a mentality, and I previously said it, like it's your intentions that you're doing with that man, and then we have to also segregate that being a wife in a mental setting does not mean that you are wife, right? Because a lot of times we are finding ourselves having experiences with men who we are not a wife for, You know, it's inherent for me to be submissive. It is inherent for me to be kind. It is inherent for me to receive direction. I'm going to do that with whatever man that I'm having the experience with. If that does not lead me down the aisle, that means he did not idealize me as a wife. But that does not mean that I did not treat him in my wifely manner, because it was still the intention. I'm going into this giving him everything that I got as a wife would. I'm going into this to show him I am capable of being a wife if he chooses me to do so. But I do think it's intention. I do think it's more so of the sectors, the categories that men put us in. A lot of times women have this idea that they're going to move you up the ladder like the army or the Lord. They don't do that. Once they already see that behavior, you where you are. And maybe you could do some overtime to move up. It's not likely, but that's where it stands, right? Like a lot of times women are portraying all of these bad behaviors and thinking that, well, I can be a wife, I can just wake up and treat him differently. People typically don't behave like that. He's definitely not going to trust the fact that if he give you a ring, you went from being super detached and, you know, calling him late at night to just being the most caring, nurturing, respectful woman in the world. It don't work like that.
Well, Trev.
Yeah, so I definitely get what he meant. There's a difference between the wife and the boss babe. There's a difference between the wife and the scallywag or the harlot or baby mom, side chick.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Right? And what he normally spoke to, almost always, right, specifically, he spoke to the high value man, right? Because that's what all of his callers called up and we're looking for, right? The quote unquote high value man. And there are certain things that you must possess. There's attributes you must possess, period, right? Because they have options. A lot of men with options. Because there's some dudes that really don't care. And they will make a hoe into a housewife, right? But when you want a man of value, then you have to bring certain things to the table. And like Paris was saying, you have to have intent behind it. You can't just start out, have a hot girl summer, and then another one, and have this dude and that dude, and then all of a sudden become a wife. It's like training, right? It starts, hopefully, you had both your parents. Hopefully, your father taught you some game. Hopefully, your mother showed you how to be a lady. And then you can develop into that when you're grown, because they're going to expect you to be nurturing. They're going to expect you to respect them. They're going to expect you to support them and put them first. And if you can't do that, then you're one of all of the other names I just mentioned besides a wife. And you either in or you ain't, just like Sweeney just said.
Go ahead, Casey.
Okay, so from watching the video, and I definitely feel that women that were raised to be wives have vision for their life, and they have discernment when it comes to what they want their life to look like at an early age, regardless of maturity, career. It's been ingrained in you as a young girl, as a young lady, that this is the type of life you should desire. This is how you should align yourself and what you should be seeking, and how you should be discerning the guys that come into your path. I think that is what he's talking about as far as wives versus everything else, because a woman that wants to be a wife is going to have vision for motherhood, for her family, for her husband. She's going to want to pour into her husband being that rib. She's going to want that at an early age. She's not going to be prioritizing old hot girl summers and the nest egg like he's talking about. Because when you're talking about being a matriarch of your family, you know you need a patriarch, right? And you want the whole 9 yards. And that comes at an early age. It doesn't come at 35 after you making six figures and now it's time to slow down and now I got to find my king and do X and Y and Z. It's not going to work like that. That's going to be ingrained in you at 18, at 21. So when that man comes across your path, you're going to have that discernment to know this is somebody that I should pay attention to. My father told me this is the type of man, he has the type of values and morals that I see. You don't have to see a bag yet, but you can have discernment to see that this is the type of man that I should get in line with and get in line beside and behind to build the life that I desire and that's been ingrained in me as a young daughter. That's how I was raised. And that's how I understand him to say, this is the difference between a wife and everything else, because everything else is going to prioritize self, the world, and other things, and be distracted left and right and not have their mind on the prize of the long-term goals. Kevin Samuels always talked about women don't think about long term, right? A lot of Black women don't think long term. They think selfishly long term.